Breaking news this morning, moments ago, Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, arrived at a federal courthouse in Maryland. He is facing charges of mishandling classified documents. Bolton, now a vocal Trump critic, says the charges are politically motivated. But there are some key differences between Bolton's case and those against two other Trump critics indicted by the DOJ recently. CNN's Caitlin Polantz is outside court. Give us some sense of what you saw this morning as John Bolton made his way to turn himself in.
Well, Sarah, he didn't say anything, not much at all, but John Bolton is here now at the federal courthouse. His lawyers are here, prosecutors are here. We're just waiting to see when a judge would take the bench for Bolton to have his initial appearance in federal court facing this indictment. The indictment, it's 26 pages long. And it is lengthy because there's so much detail about what John Bolton is accused of. 18 counts of transmitting or possessing classified information, national defense information that he shouldn't have had in an unsecured way after he was the national security advisor. Much of the detail in this indictment, Sarah, it is about what was happening in 2018 and 2019 when John Bolton was working in the Trump White House, taking notes of his day. He's a meticulous note taker. He's a very hard worker, someone who was here even at the courthouse almost before it opened this morning. And he's a person then who was recording his notes into Word documents, and then those Word documents he was sharing with, allegedly, two family members that he shouldn't have been sharing with on unsecured email accounts, and then also having them printed out and kept in his house, which he was not allowed to do after he was national security advisor as well. Some of the detail here is very likely to be read to him in court when he makes this initial appearance today, Sarah. He would potentially have the opportunity to plead not guilty at this time. He does say he wants to fight his charges. He's accused Donald Trump of weaponizing the Justice Department against him for a political outcome. But some of the detail here that he will be told, very likely by a judge, is that he's accused of telling these people in his family that he wanted his notes to be saved for, quote, a diary in the future. Sarah?
All right, Caitlin Polantz there outside the court as John Bolton responds to charges. John?
All right, with us now, Tom Dupree, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, and Michael Moore, the former U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia. Gentlemen, thanks so much for being with us. Presumably, you each had a chance to look through the indictment. Tom, let me just start with you. What jumps out to you? How serious is the situation for Ambassador Bolton?
It's a serious situation, and what jumped out at me when I reviewed that indictment was how starkly it differed from the indictments we saw of Jim Comey and Tish James. Those indictments were short, they were skeletal, they were haiku-like. This is long and thorough, 26 pages, very detailed allegations. It's what prosecutors call a speaking indictment that really tells a story and goes into great detail and puts on public display the evidence that the government has gathered, much of which I think was actually picked up when they executed the search warrant at John Bolton's house. But the government has already put a lot of cards on the table, and the allegations, and at this point they are just allegations, do tell a fairly disturbing story about how Bolton allegedly mishandled classified information.
And if you read the indictment, it seems to suggest he knew there was something in the way he was handling it, at least allegedly. There's this point, Michael, let me read to you in the indictment where it says, on or about July 23rd, 2018, Bolton sent individuals 1 and 2 a 24-page document described information that Bolton learned while national security advisor. Less than 3 hours later, Bolton sent individuals 1 and 2 a follow-up message that stated, none of which we talked about. 3 exclamation points. In response, individual 1 sent a message that stated, shh. So how does that state of mind, Michael, maybe knowledge that this needed to be kept quiet, how could that impact the case?
Yeah, well, I'm glad to be with you. Look, this is a serious indictment, and it just tells us how seriously we need to take the handling of national security information. But the bottom line is this is really a case about him writing a book. And what he would do is, by all appearances, is he would take some notes while he was in meeting in his own hand. Those notes may include information which was discussed, which shouldn't have been discussed outside the meeting. He would then send those to family members who were helping him compile his manuscript or his notes to be submitted to an editor. This is not a case where he had a little secret camera and he was taking pictures of the warplane plans and all this and sending them to China or something. That's not what this case is. But it's serious nonetheless because he knows enough, having had the roles that he's had in the U.S. government, he knows enough about how to handle classified and sensitive information, and he didn't do that here. So, there's a little bit of a follow-up tale, and that is that he did go through a declassification program or a process when he put his book out. Yep. So the government had a chance to look into some information. So there may be some knowledge questions there. So it's not an open and shut case, but it does tell us that at least he knew, and he certainly signed acknowledgments when he got his security clearance, that he would know and protect this information from this type of dissemination for people who had not been given a security clearance. But there's more to the story, and it'll depend on whether or not Mr. Lowell, that is Mr. Bolton's lawyers, can convince either judges or a jury that the taking of notes for a diary is not a crime.
Abbe Lowell, who has defended many high-profile clients over the last several years. And one defense he might use, Tom, is vindictive prosecution, trying to get this case thrown out altogether. Now, it's worth noting these charges brought by career prosecutors, not the hasty, rushed prosecutions we've seen in the cases of Comey and Letitia James. But how much ammunition has President Trump himself given this argument from Abbe Lowell just with his statements over the last several years and recently about John Bolton?
Sure. Well, look, these vindictive prosecution claims are notoriously difficult to win if you're a defense lawyer. But I will say that President Trump, by specifically directing the prosecution of certain people, at least gives them some ammunition to make that argument. I think in this case, though, it would be particularly difficult for Bolton to win and to knock out this indictment based on vindictive prosecution for the reason you mentioned. This indictment, again, unlike the James and the Comey indictments, was signed by a team of 6 prosecutors. Many of these are career prosecutors, which really does go a long way toward erasing any taint that might arise from Trump specifically directing this prosecution or ordering this to be pursued. The fact that this was signed off on by career prosecutors who reviewed the evidence and said in their professional judgment this was sufficient to warrant charges will go a long way toward defeating any defense of vindictive prosecution.
And Michael, a couple things here that are different from this case. There was a transmission, allegedly, of classified material. It's not just retention, like boxes of records here. He hit send, allegedly, to these AOL accounts. And there was a hack by a foreign actor into this information. So how does that color the case, Michael?
Well, I mean, that makes it, and it probably is a good example of why it's all the more serious, and that is because he was using a non-secure server, a non-secure system to transmit information. That is his notes that he had handwritten. He would apparently scan them or take a picture or whatever, and he would have those notes sent over a non-secure program. And that's how ultimately they were subject to hack. And apparently they were hacked by Iran or people connected with Iran. And that's the danger of having this information out there. So that does complicate it. Remember that Special Counsel Hur, at the time when he was investigating Biden, even talked about that Biden had notes in his own hand, and he considered, the prosecution considered those things to be classified and subject to the protections of classified and protected information. So, the notes, it's not a total way out for Bolton, but the fact that he put them on that server, that may be the sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in his favor. On the vindictive prosecution, real quick, if I can, this is a double-edged sword for him, because at the one time he's going to say, look, I'm just one of 3 people now who's been indicted within a week by this rogue administration who's bringing in outside prosecutors to move us forward. On the other side of the sword, somebody's going to say, probably the government is going to say, but look at these cases and look at how different they are. And look, yes, you can argue in another court if you want to about the Comey and the James indictment, but again, look at the detail that we've laid out in the stark contrast, and it shows that these cases were on 2 different tracks and were governed by 2 different principles when it comes to prosecution of federal cases. So I don't know that he's got a winning argument there, but he's certainly going to try to ride the train that that Mr. Comey and Ms. James are going to be shoveling coal into as they go down the track toward their motion.
Michael Moore, Tom Dupree, great to see both of you. We are watching this courthouse very closely. We'll update everyone we get information about what is taking place there.